I still remember the sound of the phone hitting the hospital floor. It slipped right out of my shaking hand when the nurse said the words, "They refused." At first, I thought I had heard her wrong. My mind was foggy from painkillers and the dull, crushing ache spreading through my ribs. The room smelled like antiseptic and plastic, and the beeping machines around me felt louder than my own heartbeat. "What do you mean, they refused?" I whispered. The nurse looked uncomfortable. She was standing near the doorway, holding a clipboard against her chest like it might shield her from the conversation. "I called the number you gave us," she said gently. "Your parents. We explained the situation, that you were in surgery and that your baby needed a temporary guardian until you woke up." My chest tightened. "And?" Her lips pressed together. "They said they couldn't take the baby." For a moment, the entire world went silent. Not quiet, silent, like someone had sucked all the air out of the room. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process the sentence, trying to rearrange the words into something that made sense. My parents, my own parents, refused? Did they say why? I asked. The nurse hesitated. Then she sighed softly. She said the baby wasn't their responsibility. My throat burned. I turned my face toward the window because I didn't want her to see the tears sliding down my temple. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy with rain. Cars moved slowly through the parking lot, their headlights cutting through the drizzle. Somewhere down the hall, a newborn cried, and suddenly everything inside me collapsed. Because just 12 hours earlier, I had been holding my daughter for the first time. Her name was Emma. She was tiny, warm, wrapped in a soft pink blanket with little white ducks printed across it. When the nurse placed her in my arms, she blinked up at me with these wide, confused eyes, like she was trying to figure out where she had landed. "Hi," I whispered to her. My voice cracked when I said it, because in that moment, everything felt possible. Even after everything I had been through, especially after everything I had been through. But life has a strange way of turning beautiful moments into disasters. Just 6 hours after leaving the hospital with Emma, my car spun across 3 lanes of traffic. I didn't even see the truck coming. One second, I was singing softly to Emma in the back seat while the rain tapped against the windshield. The next second, there was a deafening crash, glass exploding, metal twisting, and then darkness. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital, alone. My first thought was Emma. "Where's my baby?" I croaked, grabbing the nurse's sleeve. "She's safe," the nurse said quickly. "She was in the car seat. She's in the neonatal unit for observation, but she's okay." Relief hit me so hard I almost blacked out again. "Can I see her?" "Soon," the nurse promised. But then the doctors rushed in. Broken ribs, a fractured collarbone, internal bleeding. They had to take me into surgery immediately. Before they wheeled me away, the nurse asked a simple question. "Is there someone we can call to take care of your baby while you recover?" I didn't hesitate. "My parents," I said, because no matter how distant things had been lately, they were still my parents. They would help, right? Apparently not. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and turned back toward the nurse. "What happens now?" I asked. Her expression softened. "For now, Emma will stay in the hospital nursery." "How long?" "A few days, maybe longer." The thought of my newborn daughter lying alone in a hospital bassinet made my stomach twist. "She needs family," I whispered. The nurse nodded slowly. "Is there anyone else we can call?" I hesitated. There was one person, but I hadn't spoken to him in almost 2 years. "My grandfather?" I said quietly. The nurse scribbled down the number. "I'll give him a call." As she stepped out of the room, I closed my eyes. Memories started flooding back. My parents' faces when I told them I was pregnant, the silence at the dinner table, my mother's tight smile. "Are you serious?" she asked. "Yes." My father leaned back in his chair like the news physically exhausted him. "You're 26, he said flatly. "Single, working 2 jobs, and now you're bringing a baby into this?" I remember gripping the edge of the table. "I can handle it." My mother shook her head. "You've always been stubborn." "What does that mean?" "It means you make choices without thinking about the consequences." The words stung, but I forced myself to stay calm. "I'm keeping the baby." My father sighed. "Well," he muttered frustratedly, "don't expect us to raise it." At the time, I thought it was just frustration talking. Parents say things they don't mean when they're angry. At least, that's what I told myself. But now, lying in that hospital bed, listening to the rain hit the window, I realized something painful. Maybe they had meant it all along. The door opened again. The nurse stepped back in. "He's coming," she said. My heart skipped. "Grandpa?" She nodded. "He said he'll be here within the hour." Relief washed over me so suddenly I almost cried again. My grandfather had always been different from my parents. Warmer, kinder. He was the kind of man who carried peppermints in his pocket and slipped $20 bills into birthday cards with a wink. When I was little, he used to sit on the porch swing with me and tell stories about growing up in a tiny farming town. "Life's simple when you keep your heart in the right place," he used to say. I hadn't seen him much lately. After my pregnancy announcement, things in the family got complicated, but hearing that he was coming made something loosen inside my chest. An hour later, the door burst open, and there he was, 82 years old, still wearing the same brown leather jacket he'd owned for decades. His gray hair was messy like he rushed out the door without even looking in a mirror. "Kiddo," he said breathlessly. I started crying again the moment I saw him. He walked over quickly and took my hand. "What happened?" I explained everything between shaky breaths. The accident, Emma in the nursery, my parents refusing to take her. Grandpa's jaw tightened as I spoke. When I finished, he didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he patted my hand gently. "Don't worry," he said quietly. "I'm here now." Something in his voice made me feel safe for the first time since the crash. But then he did something unexpected. He pulled out his phone. "Who are you calling?" I asked. "Your parents." My stomach dropped. "Grandpa, don't." But he had already dialed. He put the phone on speaker. It rang twice. Then my father answered. "Hello?" Grandpa's voice turned sharp. "Why did you refuse your granddaughter?" The silence on the line was immediate, heavy, and suddenly my father didn't sound so confident anymore.
The silence on the phone stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. I could hear faint breathing on the other end, and somewhere in the background my mother whispered something I couldn't quite make out. Grandpa didn't move. He just held the phone in front of him, his expression calm but hard in a way I had never seen before. Finally, my father spoke again. "You're bluffing." Grandpa's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You think so?" "This is ridiculous," my father continued. "You're not going to change your entire will over a disagreement." Grandpa leaned against the side of my hospital bed, his voice still low and steady. "I'm not changing it over a disagreement." Then he paused. "I'm changing it over character." The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. On the other end of the line, my mother spoke up sharply. "Dad, don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic," Grandpa replied. "Your daughter is lying in a hospital bed after a car accident, and your newborn granddaughter is sitting in a hospital nursery alone because you decided she was not your problem." My chest tightened hearing him say it out loud, because that was exactly what they had said, word for word. My father sighed impatiently. "She got pregnant without a plan, without a husband. What did she expect?" My fingers curled into the thin hospital blanket. Grandpa glanced at me, then back at the phone. "You're really comfortable saying that?" "I'm being realistic." My mother added, "She made adult decisions. She should deal with adult consequences." Grandpa's eyes darkened again. "Well," he said slowly, "you're about to experience one of those consequences yourselves." Another pause. Then my father spoke more carefully. "What exactly are you threatening, Dad?" Grandpa didn't hesitate. "You know exactly what." The air in the room felt heavy. My parents had always assumed one thing about Grandpa, that everything he had would eventually pass down to them. The farm outside Cedar Creek, the old lake house, the savings he'd built over 60 years. My father had mentioned it casually many times. Someday that property will be ours. But Grandpa had never actually confirmed that, until now. "You're being manipulated," my father said. Grandpa snorted. "By who? My injured granddaughter?" "She's always played the victim," my father replied. I felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Grandpa slowly shook his head. "You know what the worst part is?" he said. "What?" "I'm not surprised." Another long silence. Then Grandpa delivered the final sentence. "If you're not standing in this hospital room within the next hour, you can forget about inheriting a single acre of my land." My mother gasped, "Dad!" But Grandpa had already ended the call. The room went quiet except for the steady beeping of the heart monitor beside me. I stared at him. "Grandpa?" He slipped the phone back into his jacket pocket. "Don't worry about them." "But what if they—" "They'll come," he said calmly. "How do you know?" He gave a small, knowing smile. "Because your father cares about one thing more than pride." "What?" "My will." I let out a shaky breath. It felt strange hearing someone finally say out loud what our family had quietly revolved around for years. Grandpa squeezed my hand gently. "Now," he said, "tell me about my great-granddaughter." Just hearing those words made my tears prick my eyes again. "She's perfect," I whispered. "Does she look like you?" "Everyone says she has my nose." Grandpa chuckled softly. "Well, poor kid." I laughed weakly, wincing as my ribs protested. Then the door opened again. A nurse peeked in. "Are you feeling strong enough for a short visit?" My heart jumped. "With Emma?" She nodded. "Just a few minutes." "Yes," I said immediately. 2 minutes later, they wheeled my bed down the quiet hallway toward the nursery. The fluorescent lights blurred above me as we moved. Grandpa walked beside the bed, his hand resting gently on the rail like he was afraid I might disappear if he let go. When we reached the nursery window, the nurse guided my bed closer. Inside, several tiny bassinets lined the room, and there she was, Emma. She was so small she barely filled the blanket. Her little fists were tucked near her cheeks, and she made these tiny, sleepy movements like she was dreaming about something important. My heart felt like it might burst. "That's her," I whispered. Grandpa leaned closer to the glass. For a moment, the tough 82-year-old man who had just threatened my parents looked completely different. His eyes softened. "Well, I'll be," he murmured softly. "She's beautiful." The nurse wheeled my bed slightly closer so I could see better. Emma stretched one tiny hand and yawned. Grandpa chuckled softly. "She's already stubborn. Runs in the family." We stayed there quietly for a few minutes, just watching her breathe, just existing in that fragile moment of peace. Then my phone buzzed on the tray beside my bed. Grandpa glanced at the screen. "Your father." My stomach twisted. "Answer it," he added. I hesitated, then picked up the phone. "Hello?" My father's voice sounded tight. "We're on the way." I didn't respond. My mother spoke from somewhere nearby in the car. "This is unbelievable." My father lowered his voice slightly. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "You refused my baby," I said quietly. "We had concerns." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "She's your granddaughter." My father didn't reply to that. Instead, he said, "We'll be there in 20 minutes." Then the call ended. I stared at the dark screen. Grandpa watched me carefully. What did he say? They're coming. Good. I looked through the nursery window again at Emma. Her tiny chest rose and fell slowly, and suddenly a strange thought crossed my mind. They're not coming for her, I said softly. Grandpa didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. They were coming for the inheritance. 25 minutes later, the hallway outside my hospital room filled with hurried steps. The door opened. My parents walked in. My mother still wore the same beige coat she'd had for years. My father's jaw was tight, his expression stiff and controlled. The tension in the room was immediate. Grandpa didn't even stand up. He simply looked at them. Well, he said quietly, you made it. My father crossed his arms. Where's the baby? I blinked. You didn't even ask how I'm doing. My mother glanced at my bandaged shoulder. You look fine. Grandpa exhaled sharply through his nose. She was in surgery 4 hours ago. My father shrugged. You're awake now. The coldness in his voice felt unreal, like I was talking to strangers instead of the people who raised me. Grandpa slowly shook his head. You want to see the baby? My parents exchanged a quick look. My mother nodded. Yes. Grandpa studied their faces carefully. Then he said something that made the entire room freeze. No. My father frowned. What do you mean, no? Grandpa's voice was steady. You refused her when she needed you. My mother scoffed. Oh, please, Dad. And now you want to meet her because you're afraid of losing money. The silence that followed was thick. My father's face flushed. That's not why we came. Grandpa raised an eyebrow. Then why did you? No one spoke for several seconds, and then my mother said something that made my stomach drop. Because we need to talk about who the baby's father is. My heart skipped, because suddenly the conversation was about to go somewhere I never expected, and the look on Grandpa's face told me he was about to hear a family secret that would change everything.
The moment my mother said those words, the air in the hospital room changed. Because we need to talk about who the baby's father is. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. My fingers tightened around the edge of the hospital blanket. What are you talking about? I asked. My mother didn't look at me. She looked straight at Grandpa, and that alone made my stomach twist. My father shifted his weight, like he had been waiting for this moment. Dad, he said, you don't know the full story. Grandpa folded his arms slowly. Then enlighten me. My mother sighed dramatically and finally turned her eyes toward me. This situation didn't just happen overnight. My pulse started pounding in my ears. What situation? The pregnancy, she said flatly. The words stung more than they should have, like Emma wasn't even a person to her, just a situation. Grandpa's voice came out low. She had a baby. Yes, my mother replied, but you don't know the kind of mess that comes with it. I stared at her. You're talking about my daughter. My father cut in before she could respond. The man who got her pregnant disappeared. I swallowed. That's not... He walked away, my father continued. No support, no marriage, nothing. Grandpa looked at me quietly. Is that true? I hesitated. Then I nodded slowly. Yes. My parents looked almost triumphant, like they had just proven some kind of point. My mother crossed her arms. See? Grandpa raised an eyebrow. So what? My father frowned. So what, Dad? She's alone with a baby. Grandpa looked at him like he had just said the most ridiculous thing imaginable. And my father blinked. You don't see the problem? No, Grandpa said calmly. The room went silent again, because my father clearly hadn't expected that answer. She made irresponsible choices, my father insisted. Grandpa tilted his head slightly. You're telling me the biggest problem in this story is that a man ran away? Well, "That's not her failure," Grandpa interrupted. My mother scoffed. "Oh, please, don't start with the lectures." But Grandpa ignored her. He walked slowly to the chair beside my hospital bed and sat down. Then he looked directly at my parents. "Let me ask you something." Neither of them answered. "If this baby had been born to your golden child, Vanessa, would you be standing here calling it a mistake?" My mother's face tightened. "That's different." "How?" "She would have handled things better." Grandpa chuckled quietly. "You mean she would have hidden it better?" My father's jaw clenched. "Dad, that's not fair." Grandpa leaned forward slightly. "No," he said softly. "What's not fair is refusing to help your daughter after she nearly died in a car accident." The room went quiet again. My mother shifted uncomfortably. "We didn't know it was that serious." "She was in surgery," Grandpa replied. My father rubbed his forehead. "This entire conversation is pointless." "No," Grandpa said. "It's very important." My father sighed. "Fine. What do you want from us?" Grandpa's voice turned calm again. "I want you to meet your granddaughter." My parents exchanged another look. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then my mother said quietly, "Where is she?" Grandpa stood up. "Follow me." A few minutes later, we reached the nursery again. The nurse allowed them to step inside briefly. I watched from my wheelchair as my parents stood beside the bassinet. Emma was awake now. Her tiny eyes blinked slowly as she waved one little hand in the air. For a long moment, my parents just stared at Emma. My mother's face softened slightly. "She's small," she said. My father looked down at the baby quietly. Then Emma made a tiny squeaking sound and stretched. Grandpa chuckled beside me. "She's saying hello." My father hesitated. Then something unexpected happened. He reached down and gently touched Emma's tiny hand. She wrapped her fingers around his. The change in his face was subtle, but I saw it, and so did Grandpa. My mother sighed quietly. "Well, she does look like you." I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe this moment would fix things. Maybe... But then Grandpa cleared his throat, and suddenly the atmosphere shifted again. "There's one more thing," he said. My father looked at him. "What?" Grandpa slipped his hands into the pockets of his old leather jacket. "I spoke to my lawyer this morning." My parents stiffened instantly. "And?" "I updated my will." The silence in the nursery felt heavy. My father looked nervous now. "What does that mean?" Grandpa's voice stayed calm. "It means the Cedar Creek farm—" My parents leaned in slightly. "Will skip your generation." My mother blinked. "What?" "It will go directly to Emma." My father's face went pale. "You're giving everything to the baby?" "Not everything," Grandpa said, "but the farm, the lake house, and most of my estate." My mother stared at him like she had been slapped. "You can't be serious." "I am." My father shook his head. "This is insane." Grandpa shrugged. "Maybe, but I'd rather leave my life's work to someone who wasn't rejected before she even opened her eyes." No one spoke after that. Emma made another tiny sound in her bassinet, the only sound in the entire room. My parents looked stunned. Grandpa looked peaceful. And I just sat there staring at my daughter, realizing that everything about our family had just changed forever. A few days later, I was finally discharged from the hospital. Grandpa drove me home himself. Emma slept quietly in the back seat the entire ride. When we pulled into my driveway, Grandpa turned off the engine and looked at me. "You did good," he said. I smiled weakly. "I just survived." He chuckled. "Sometimes that's the same thing." I carried Emma into the house that evening, the quiet rooms feeling completely different now, like the start of something new. Later that night, while she slept in her bassinet beside my bed, I sat there watching her tiny chest rise and fall, and I thought about everything that had happened. The accident, the phone call, the moment my parents refused her, and the moment Grandpa stood up for us. Life had changed in ways I never expected, but one thing was certain: Emma would never grow up wondering if someone was on her side, because she had me and she had Grandpa. And if you stayed with this story all the way to the end, thank you for listening. If you enjoy powerful emotional stories like this one, don't forget to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable stories. Because sometimes the people who refuse you today are the same ones who regret it tomorrow.